They mocked him every single day. They called him useless, fatherless, a mistake that should never have been born. But on the day they tried to drag him into the village square and shame him for a crime he didn't commit, something happened. A stranger arrived, driving a car nobody in that village had ever seen before. He stopped, looked at the boy everyone hated, and asked one question. Where is Kene? The entire village froze because the way that man said it, the fire in his eyes, it was like he knew something none of them knew. And what he said next shut the whole village up. My name is Patience. And before you judge a quiet child, listen carefully, because the truth you ignore today may be the truth that saves him tomorrow. This is Kene's story, a story of humiliation, secrets, and a truth that almost destroyed a village. Until the day everything came out.
Kenya was the kind of boy people looked at twice, first with confusion, then with judgment. He was quiet but not timid, smart but not confident, kind but never protected. No matter what he did, villagers still called him too gentle, too soft, or worst of all, useless. And Kenya heard it all, every day, like a curse he didn't choose. He lived with his father's younger brother and his wife, Uncle Obina and Auntie Chica. People believed they took him in out of kindness after his father died, but truth was painful. Kenya was more servant than family. He woke before sunrise, swept the compound, boiled water, fetched firewood, washed plates, bathed his younger cousins, and sometimes missed school because chores never ended. Yet anytime he made a small mistake, Auntie Chica would shout loud enough for the whole street to hear, "Lazy boy, what are we even feeding you for?" But Kenya never talked back, never defended himself. That was the problem. His silence made people think he had done something wrong. His quietness made others comfortable blaming him for anything. The village boys mocked him the most. They always said he behaved like someone who didn't know who his father was. Kenya would laugh it off, but inside, those words cut deeply, because even he didn't know the full truth of his father's story, only pieces adults hid whenever he entered a room. Anytime he asked, people said, "Don't ask questions that will bring trouble." And trouble came anyway. It started with money. 48,000 naira missing from Auntie Chica's wardrobe. She screamed so loudly the entire neighborhood gathered. Before Kenya even opened his mouth, she dragged him out and slapped him. "You took the money, you this snake we are feeding." Kenya froze. He didn't even know she kept money there. Uncle Obina wasn't home. The crowd surrounded the boy instantly, some whispering, some pointing, some shaking their heads like they always expected this day. "When a boy doesn't resemble anybody, he will behave like this," an old woman muttered. Kenya tried to speak, but adults don't like children who try to defend themselves, so every word he said only made them believe he was lying. They searched his things. Nothing. They beat him again. Still nothing. Someone suggested calling the village chairman. Another said it was time to teach the boy sense. Auntie Chica insisted she saw him coming out of the room. She didn't even believe herself, but anger makes people invent memories. Kenya kept saying he didn't take it, but his voice was too soft, too shaky, too desperate. People don't trust desperation. By evening, Uncle Obina returned and found a compound full. Instead of checking calmly, he lost control and beat Kenya with his belt until his back was marked. Everyone watched. No one stopped him. They believed they were helping correct a thief before he becomes a bigger problem. But the money never appeared. That night, Kenya sat outside crying quietly so no one would hear. And while crying, he remembered something strange, something he had ignored for years. His mother, before she died, once whispered to him, "Kenya, if anything ever happens to me, look for the truth. Your life depends on it." At that time, he thought she was talking about property or inheritance. But now, he felt she meant something else. Something heavier. Something dangerous. Days passed. People insulted him everywhere. Schoolmates avoided him. Some teachers made comments loud enough for him to hear. The label thief stuck to him like mud that refused to wash off. But the real trouble began when a rumor spread. Kenya might not be Obina's brother's son. That rumor grew legs. It ran. It spread so fast that even people who didn't know him suddenly had opinions about him. One evening, a group of women whispered loud enough for him to hear, "You know these children born from secret places, anything is possible." Another added, "Maybe the boy behaves this way because he came from the wrong man." Kenya was shaking. What wrong man? Then something happened. Something unexpected. A stranger arrived in the village. A tall man in expensive clothes, driving a car that looked like it shouldn't be anywhere near their dusty roads. He asked quietly for directions. People stared at him because he carried power in his posture. Clean, polished, confident. But he didn't smile, not even once.
He asked one question. "Where can I find a boy named Kene?" That question spread faster than wildfire. Children ran inside shouting, women paused their gossip, men came out of shops. In minutes, the entire village was watching the stranger. Kenneth stepped forward slowly, confused. The man stared at him for a long time, too long. Everybody noticed something in his eyes: shock, anger, disbelief, guilt? No one could tell, but something changed in his expression. Without greeting anyone, the man said, "Come with me. You deserve answers." The whole village gasped. Auntie Chikan shouted that Kenneth wasn't going anywhere. Uncle Obina demanded to know who the man was. The stranger finally introduced himself. "My name is Chief Damian Ezwego." People stepped back instantly. Chief Ezwego, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the region, a man whose name opened doors, a man with political power, a man feared and respected. But why was he looking for Kenneth? Chief Damian looked around and asked the villagers one question: "Who has been calling this boy a thief?" The silence was loud. Auntie Chika muttered something about the missing money. Chief Damian ignored her completely. He turned to Kenneth. "My son, there is something you must hear." The word "son" dropped like thunder. People screamed, some covered their mouths. One elderly man almost fell. Auntie Chika shouted, "He is not your son. Kenneth is Obina's brother's child." Chief Damian's face tightened. "No, he is not." He pulled something from his pocket, a folded paper, a DNA test result. Everyone froze. The crowd grew and grew. The test looked official, stamped, authorized. Kenneth's hands shook as he held it. He struggled to read, but the number at the bottom was clear: 99.98%. Auntie Chika shouted again, "Where did you get that from? Who gave Kenneth sample?" Chief Damian finally explained what no one saw coming. Months ago, he had fallen sick. Doctors feared it was hereditary. They told him he needed to test all possible children he had fathered, legally or otherwise. It forced him to face his past, including a woman he once loved but abandoned when she became pregnant, Kenneth's mother. He had searched for her, but by the time he found her village, she was already dead. People told him her child, Kenneth, had been taken in by relatives. He didn't want to disrupt Kenneth's life without confirmation, so he quietly collected DNA samples, a toothbrush, an old exercise book with dried saliva marks, a comb. The test came back positive. He had been looking for the right moment to come publicly. He didn't expect to find a crowd ready to stone the boy. Now the whole truth spilled out. Kenneth's father wasn't Obina's brother. Kenneth was the secret son of a billionaire. Auntie Chika collapsed to the floor, screaming that her enemies had won. Uncle Obina stood like a statue, unable to speak. People who mocked Kenneth for years suddenly changed their tone. "Aya, the poor boy, oh. We always knew something was special about him. God does not sleep." The same people who raised sticks to beat him now wanted to touch him like a miracle. Kenneth didn't say a word. He was shaking, sweating, breathing too fast. His whole body felt weak. Chief Damian placed a hand on his shoulder. "I failed your mother, but I will not fail you." For the first time in his life, Kenneth felt something he had never felt before: protection. Real protection. The villagers watched as the boy they mocked, rejected, insulted, and nearly destroyed walked into a billionaire's car, and the dust from the tires rising like a warning to everyone who once called him nothing. And as the car drove away, people finally understood. Sometimes, the person everyone looks down on is the one destiny has been lifting in silence. And sometimes, the boy everyone mocks is holding a truth powerful enough to humble a whole village.
As the billionaire's car rolled out of the village, dust rising behind the tires, something changed in the air. People who once spat at Kenneth now wished they had spoken gently. People who mocked him wished they had greeted him with respect. People who beat him wished they had stayed in their houses that day. But it was too late. Kenneth didn't look back, not because he wanted revenge, but because the boy who had spent his whole life apologizing for existing finally understood something powerful. He was never the problem. Their ignorance was. When he stepped into that car, he stepped out of a life of shame and into a life his mother prayed for but never lived to see. And the villagers? they learned a lesson the hard way. Sometimes, the child you treat like nothing is the one destiny has been hiding like gold. And sometimes, the innocent boy you mock is carrying a truth big enough to silence an entire village forever.
Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.